Well, thank you so much. I am really pleased to be here. I also have a loud voice, so it doesn't matter if it doesn't work. I want to thank you, the Global Compact. You have done an incredible job to try to really bring on board the private sector, I would say of all sizes. And I have to thank Lisa Kingo and you, Melissa, and of course all the national Global Compact, the local networks actually, because this is a tremendous job. Let me tell you where I see an opportunity for us to work. All the 5 regional commissions, we are convening a regional forum for sustainable development. And you were there, Jorge, I think you participated with us. And of course, Gabriela Agosto in the Latin American and Caribbean Forum. We just had it in April. We had 150 members of the private sector in that forum. And 8 of them were very, I would say, active panelists that brought to the table and to the attention why is it good business to participate in Agenda 2030? Why is it good business for the countries and for not only for the private sector, for everybody? And what were the lessons we learned from this participatory process in these regional forums? And each region has its forums, because you have it in Africa, you have it in ESCWA, you have it in Asia Pacific. So I think we should have a more, you should be with us, of course, and you have been with us, actually, and your members, and of course DESA has been with us as well. What are the first things that we discussed? How do we change the conversation between the private sector, the governments, and the civil society? Honestly, we need to change it. Business as usual is not working. And if we don't change the conversation profoundly, we're not going to be able to this is not business as usual at all. So the conversation has to change in what sense? Private sector and the civil society and the national governments should talk about what are those sectors, what are those economic activities that can bring us more quickly to the completion of Agenda 2030. What is the changes of the paradigm? What is the paradigm shift? Or do we want any type of energy, or we want renewable energy? Do we want any type of transportation, or we want electromobility? I mean, let's put our stakes high, but let's sit together, like in this table, to agree upon what are the most important needs every region has where the private sector can make a difference. In my region, for example, there is plenty of inequality, no? The 20% of the highest income is receiving 45% of the productivity gains of GDP. No, it's not a matter only of poverty, it's a matter of inequality. The top 10% has wealth concentration and income concentration. So we need to change that conversation with the private sector. The private sector says, no, I'm not willing to pay any taxes, I'm not willing to, no. So, come on, give me a break. And let me tell you the sectors in which we have opportunities. Of course, there are some opportunities that we need to grab, and one of them, for example, is health taxes. We have done a very, very, I would say, thorough study for Latin America and the Caribbean on how to expand the fiscal space. But this has to be done together with the private sector, because they are the ones who are lobbying against it. But the society needs this. The society needs to avoid sugar, or to reduce sugar consumption. The society needs to reduce fossil fuels. So why don't we come together around the table and say, okay, let's work together on these couple of things, private sector and public sector, because otherwise our actions are going to be very dispersed. The second priority is we need to create employment. Yes, we do. And so what we need to do is to bring the private sector around the table and say, okay, are you creating employment or not? Because the small and medium-sized companies are the ones who create mostly the majority of employment, but they are normally in the low productivity side of the equation. So how do we bring them up? And today, education has changed completely. It's not that I'm going to study from 5 years old to 25 years old. Forget it. You have to study, work, study, work. And the paradigm is changing completely. And we need the private sector, first of all, to tell us the public sector. I am here representing an institution that works basically with governments. But in this dialogue, we need the private sector to tell us what are the skills you're needing, because we are not filling those skills. So that's a problem. So let's talk about it. We just finished a study with OECD, and we found out which are those sectors in which the private sector is needing people, and we are not. We have to then align the education and the training and whatever to in this discussion. The third point, and I want to bring the multinational corporation. You're totally right, Dominican Republic representative. You know, we have multinational companies, the same multinational companies operating in our regions, in different countries, with different standards. No. Paying different taxes. No. You see, the natural resource they are extracting in Dominican Republic, in Peru, and in Chile is the same. So why don't we have similar standards? Because otherwise the harmful tax competition is harming everybody, because it's como se llama, race to the bottom instead of, you know. So we need a dialogue with the multinational corporations who are willing, by the way. If we sit around the table with the mining industry, and we have Africa, who has a problem also of natural resources extraction, and we sit with Latin America, and we have a discussion with them, closed doors. I don't mean to say we're going to make it public, but yes, let's tell them, guys, come on. South Africa has tremendous experience on how to handle natural resources, como se dice, governance. So we need that. And we need two things. That the taxes that the multinationals are paying to their jurisdiction, which is what the OECD is trying, these BEPS, base erosion profit shifting. We want in the developing countries that the multinationals pay the taxes where they are making the productivity gains. We need that. And they're going to earn money anyway, because you know, really, the rents are very high. But at least let's have a little better distribution of the rents. Okay, my fourth point is, you know, guys, in the regions like ours, Africa and Latin America, Central America in particular, we're having a problem of migration. I think this is a problem. And you mentioned this, Lisa, in your opening remarks. Now, how do we help? We are making two proposals, at least from my region perspective, and in Central America, Mexico, and that is, migration has to be an option, not an obligation. We're not going to stop human mobility. People are going to move anyway. But how do we put our investment in the centers, in the origin, in the structural causes? And how do we make sure that the private sector participates? There's a very interesting private sector in many of these countries, and one of the things we need, number one, is that the remittances, the transfer cost of the remittances are lower. It's costing 10%. 10%, guys. The poor migrants of the world are sending back home their money, paying 10% of transaction costs. Don't you think we can do a little bit better? I think so, right? And then the social security. The migrants would be willing to pay the social security of their families and of themselves, either to the public system or to the private system. Can't we agree on something like that? Because I tell you, a migrant here might be very happy to go back home, but not very happy actually, but will go back or whatever. But if his family or her family has social protection and has agreed on some type of, so this has to be done with the private sector. These are the things we need to discuss. And to end my remark, because I could spend the whole day and I won't, of course not, is that your campaign of 1.5, I love it. We're going to have the COP25 in Chile. And I want all of you to come. And ECLAC is based in Chile. So of course we are ready and willing to help and organize whatever the Global Compact wants to do, and the social and the networks and these Global Compact local networks. Let me put you an example of Chile, the place I live. I'm not Chilean, but I'm almost, because I've been there for many years. But you know what they did? They made business with Italy, with a company of Italy, NLX, with China. The buses are the electric buses that are produced in China, So NLX, which is an Italian company, provided the financing to bring electric buses to Santiago de Chile. The government didn't pay nothing. It was all done through regulation, through a stimulus. It's an example that I always put. See, if you come to Chile on the COP25, you're going to be transported by these electric buses, because we're going to be one of those sites where people are going to leave to go to the conference, and you're going to be transported in the electric buses. And you're going to see the difference. You're going to see, oh, this is what I want. I don't want to have to be 2 hours in a car from my house to the place I work. No, I want to use my time in a different way. At least in our developing countries, cities, we would love that. So, electromobility, climate change, needs the commitment of the governments to say, I don't want to produce more fossil fuels. By 2050, Chile has said 100% is going to be renewable. Well, that's a governmental decision. But then the private sector comes along. So we, the public sector, I consider myself public sector, we should have clear rules for the private sector to follow. We have to have good governance as well. And of course, the rule of law has to be there. So let me end by saying that you count on us. You really do. We are here to help. We are not. I'm not the private sector, but I really would like very much to assist the governments and the civil society and all the multi-stakeholders, including the private sector, to see how do we change the conversation between the private sector, society, and governments. Thank you so much.